Rugby teams going bust, folks, with the upcoming demise, sadly, of Moana Pasifika here in Super Rugby. It got me thinking, since starting this channel in 2018, how many teams have we lost? And what was the reasons we're losing them? Is it just lack of money? Is it politics? What's been going on with these teams? Which league has been the most affected? Is there any teams kind of currently at risk? We'll go through them. And you guys can let me know your thoughts. If I've missed any, do let me know. I'm mostly looking kind of top flight teams from various parts of the world. I'm given constant reminders about the teams that no longer exist because for this channel, I make magnets to show the team's logos for the match reviews and previews and all that jazz. And I got a stack of them. These are just the ones I could find of teams that no longer exist. It's depressing to look at them. Some of them I don't even have anymore. I don't think I have the Sunwolves one anymore. I would have ripped off the front, cannibalized it, and turned it into a logo for a different team. So some of them, I got rid of them. I couldn't be bothered cutting out more cardboard and sticking a magnet on the back. But I've still got a fair few. And it is kind of depressing viewing. We will start with Super Rugby because they are the ones who recent times seem to be on the contracting scale. Moana Pasifika has decided they can't keep going in 2027. Their owner doesn't have the money to keep funding the club. The club runs at a loss. The owner can't keep doing that. Unless they can find someone else to take over, they will be gone at the end of the 2026 season. Their shortfall is pretty massive. It's millions of dollars. They're losing their major sponsor for next season. They don't have a home ground. Nothing's really going right for Moana Pasifika, sadly, and they're having a pretty bad season. So it's been a pretty rough story for them since entering the league as part of that COVID restructure after, old Super Rugby went and this new Super Rugby Pacific came in. They are one of the casualties. Prior to them, it was the Rebels over in Melbourne. Rebels' problem was they just had too much debt, didn't make enough money. The Rebels never got big crowds in Melbourne. Melbourne's a super competitive sports market, not for rugby union. They got tons of AFL teams and they got a very successful rugby league team. So they were very, very much down the pecking order were the Rebels. They had a small but, committed fan base, but it was not enough to keep them out of debt. They couldn't find anybody to take it over. I think there were talks about it, but it never eventuated. The Rebels were cut at the end of 2024. And prior to that, with the two teams' jerseys, you got here, this one and this one, the Sunwolves, they were going to be cut prior to COVID anyway because the JRFU decided they couldn't keep funding them. I think the Sunwolves were a bit of a project to help Japanese rugby prepare for the 2019 Rugby World Cup. They wanted players to get experience at the kind of top club level. So they were funded for a number of years. They were a fun team, had a fun fan base, early kickoff times in the afternoon over in Japan. The seasonal thing hit us in Super Rugby a bit like you see it in the URC now because people would be traveling north to play Japan at the start of the Japanese summer, and it could be pretty hot and humid sometimes in like Singapore. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, but I guess it wasn't practical. The travel times were massive. They were based in Singapore and Japan, and they had games in like Hong Kong every now and again. The travel factor was high. The costs were high. The return was not enough to keep them in business, and when the JRFU said they couldn't keep funding the team, the decision was made to cut them and streamline the comp. That was prior to COVID, which was probably going to kill them off anyway. But yeah, the writing was on the wall. Once the JRFU decided they weren't going to keep funding the team, they wanted to focus on their own domestic league, which, to be fair, seems to be going pretty well. So it maybe is the right decision for them, despite the fact that I like the Sunwolves. Then there's the Hawares, which is a brutal story because they were genuinely adding value when they were in Super Rugby. Top-class team, stacked full of Argentinian stars, made the final of the 2019 Super Rugby competition, but then COVID hits, Super Rugby goes to hell, and the Hawares do not have a place in any competition going forward. They're essentially left out in the lurch. The Hawares tell all their players, go find a club because we haven't got any games for you. So all their talent goes to Europe. The Hawares themselves end up being divided into two teams, which splits off and now takes part in the Super Rugby Americas competition. So it's a brutal story for them. It's not one where they ran out of money or lost their funding or anything like that. It's just an unfortunate one that they were left out in the lurch. Really, really brutal. Then we look at the URC and the Pro 14. They have had some teams, some hard luck stories as well, like the Kings and the Cheetahs. The Cheetahs still exist, obviously, but they've been kicked out twice, them and the Kings. kicked out of Super Rugby as that competition contracted from 18 teams down, made their new home up in Europe with the Pro 12 becoming the Pro 14. But then when Super Rugby went to hell, like I mentioned, the other 4 South African teams joined this new URC competition. It sees the Kings and the Cheetahs chucked out in the cold once again. The Kings couldn't survive it. Their debts meant they went under. The Cheetahs are still alive, but with no top flight rugby matches to regularly be played in. So, pretty rough stories for both of those clubs. The Kings may have folded anyway, because I think the Kings had pretty big debt, not great attendances and whatnot, not a great team. But yeah, it's brutal that they got kicked out twice, both of those sides. Also, Cardiff went into administration. They still exist, obviously, because the Welsh Rugby Union stepped in and took them over. But without that takeover, where would Cardiff be? They would be in very, very hot water. So still, Welsh Rugby's got issues at the moment. Obviously, there's talk about the Ospreys or the Scarlets potentially being removed going forward in a few years if the Welsh Rugby Union decides that 3 teams is the right amount. But yeah, Cardiff is the one that's got bailed out thus far. They've been into administration, gone bust in the lifetime of this channel, but are still functioning due to that buyout. Then the Premiership, which had its rough period after COVID. 3 teams went: London Irish, Worcester, and Wasps. All had their own issues, essentially debt, stadium issues, owner issues, but they all came down to no money, right? Big salaries, not enough money to keep functioning, tax bills. All 3 clubs went bust. So the Premiership went from 12 teams with promotion and relegation down to 10. And they lost the promotion and relegation element. I think Worcester are now back going, but the other 2, I think, are still not functioning at the moment. So brutal as well, because, I mean, Wasps in particular got a pretty storied history. But, yeah, all 3 clubs gone from top flight rugby. The biggest one is, though, the MLR. And most of these teams you've probably never heard of if you don't follow the American rugby. I only followed it very loosely, but they expanded like crazy for a while. Like in 2019, we had 9 MLR teams, 14 teams in the Pro 14, 15 teams in Super Rugby, 12 teams in the Premiership. The top 14 had 14 teams. Like top flight rugby was stacked full of teams. It's contracted a wee bit since then. The MLR is the biggest example. Teams which I think just ran out of money, ceased operations, include the New York, Houston, Dallas, Utah, New Orleans, Miami, and Toronto teams. You had 2 teams kicked out. The owner of the old F45 gyms, Gilchrist, the Aussie guy, he had 2 teams in the MLR, the Gilteenies and the Gilgronis, Mr. Gilchrist. But they got done for, I think, financial irregularities, salary cap breaches, that kind of thing. So those 2 teams got kicked out and never came back. And then the Atlanta team moved to LA and then got merged with the San Diego team. So there's been a lot of contraction in the MLR as a competition. They've lost a lot of teams. They're down to 6 now. So MLR's gone from, I don't know what they were at their peak, but they're down to 6. Super Rugby's gone from 18 at their peak back in the day, now down to 10. Pro 14 and whatnot has actually kept expanding. But if they lose the Ospreys or whatnot, they'll be looking at replacing somebody. So yeah, she's been pretty messy. Teams that are under pressure maybe at the moment. I know Munster's been letting people go with some redundancies. That's been pretty brutal. I know Zebre at one point was talked about potentially, because they're owned by the Italian Rugby Union, potentially going to be sold off, but couldn't find a buyer. The French clubs seem to be remarkably stable. Maybe it's just a private ownership thing where they've got rich owners that can keep them going. I'm not that au fait with the exact ownership structure of all the professional clubs around the world, but certainly there has been some changes since the channel started. And as I said, I got some jerseys and some magnets from teams who no longer play rugby at the top level. You guys let me know your thoughts. Which one was the one that you miss the most? Did you have one of these as your second team? Was it your first team? Who did you end up going to support instead? You guys take care. Fingers crossed people at Moana Pasifika land on their feet. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.